So, Jarrod, we had our first session of the new campaign, Fantasy Age, Regenesis. Um, just to kind of fill everybody in at home, how did you first get introduced to it? How did we end up starting up the campaign?
So you introduced me to Fantasy Age as a system and the campaign world of Genesis. At a sit-down, we had a one-shot. You introduced us to pre-made characters, and we played out a simple storyline and battle sequence, just 4 players and the GM, and introduced this world you had built that included floating cities and individual small towns that had specialized to fulfill the needs of those cities, societies of people who flew on the back of large griffins or birds, and then introduced the idea of this mechanic of a game system where you could have magic users specialize, where you only had the 3 classes, and so each character was able to develop its own abilities while still falling within a very simple, easy to learn in one setting RPG mechanic.
Yeah, so one thing that really turns me on about Fantasy Age is that it's only got 3 classes. It's got warriors, mages, and rogues, but those 3 classes manage to cover like everything. And so that really turned me on as a system that I could run for pickup games, for conventions. In fact, I ran that adventure again recently at OwlCon here in Houston, and learned a lot from what you guys did, because there were a lot of things you guys thought of that hadn't occurred to me, so I kind of went back and filled that in. I remember John in particular, who we're going to get on camera soon. John, I know you're watching. We're going to get you on camera soon. John really enjoyed the setting, and I think maybe it went for your love of history, that you got into the alternative history of it a little bit. Is that a fair statement?
That is. You already had a decently fleshed out campaign world, and then we as players, as we asked you questions to understand more of the world around us, it caused you to build more onto it, and so it became more real to us, and much more interesting, since we were helping in the process of creating this campaign world. But also the playstyle was very fun and easy to grasp. You handed me the choice of a grenade throwing mage or a healer, and I took the healer, and I managed to keep the party alive.
Which is your main job as a healer.
That's the main job.
Mission accomplished.
But also just being able to read the power sheets and read the character sheets to be able to survive in the world you had built as we started moving through and hunting down the enemy, got into fights with extraplanar creatures, and it made me want to do more. It made me want to look into the campaign setting more, to figure out more about this world that you had built, and it made me want to keep playing in that RPG.
So to be fair, I had a wireframe of the world, and I had really dialed in right around what I was going to let you guys see, but it was very much don't look at the man behind the curtain, because I had nothing beyond just where that adventure was written. But since you guys liked it, I did really get to work, and so I created a new setting. So now we launched the new campaign, and the way I like to do scenes with a lot of scenes in an RPG, you'll have one player who's the main player, main character, and then there might be some NPCs floating around. And rather than me trying to keep track of all those NPCs, because I get way too scatterbrained, what I did was I gave NPCs to everybody else. And so here's the big introductory scene, is one of the players, Josh, he's playing this newly minted lieutenant. His father's wealthy, he bought him a commission, and Jarrod, you and John are playing soldiers under them, and so your soldiers wouldn't have been in this scene, because this scene is where the lieutenant was being given the mission. So I played the captain of the guard, and this is a little trick I've been pulling lately. I got into doing this. I print on one side just a picture of the character and their name. So let me get that a little better into camera there for you. And then on the back, I write myself key role-playing notes. So this is how to play this character. And so I can hold it up here, and the players see who that is. And at the same time, I gave each of you who was not playing your regular character, your own character. So for instance, here's one of the other lieutenants in the city guard, and here's notes so that player could play that lieutenant. And my goal in doing this was, okay, now Jarrod's playing this character, and John is playing this character, and Josh is playing his character, and hopefully it was a way to give you guys a glimpse into the larger game world without me explicitly doing a text dump or an exposition dump, but instead letting you each get a glimpse of an individual character, and then that was something the players could take back to the table. At least it kept everybody from waiting around while the scene flowed.
I do like that you have a policy of trying to make sure everybody at the table, no matter who is the main focus of the scene, everybody plays a part. So if they're not playing their character, they're playing another character, and serving a purpose and helping to flesh out the emotional content of that scene. It's not just here's your information, now go do your job. It's become involved in the dynamics between the NPCs, and realize that every player, whether they're playing a mover and shaker, can be a mover and shaker.
So I really stumbled into that. That wasn't deliberate as such. I used to play back in Louisiana with a bunch of guys who had all been theater majors or they were English majors, and they were really into it, and they were really into playing the roles. And some of these guys could jump between 5 or 6 NPCs, and they could have NPC to NPC conversations in front of the players where we all knew which NPC was talking without any props except their mannerisms. And I can't do that at all. I'm terrible at that. I have enough trouble keeping track of what one character wants without trying to jostle a lot of characters at the same time. In fact, while we were doing this scene, I had the captain of the guard, but I also had his father, who's one of the ruling council of the city. And I was having a heck of a time remembering that I had written lines for his father to say. So I stumbled into what Ars Magica people call groks, right? Which is let the players have NPCs that they regularly play. And then I've built on that over about the last 10 or 15 years, where now more and more, any chance I get, the players get the characters, and it's my job just to be the setting. And that's a full-time job all by itself. And I occasionally play adversaries, and we'll get to talk more about that, hopefully later. But anyway, so don't give me too much credit, folks. I do this well because I'm really bad at the thing other people are good at. So anyway, so they get the mission, and the mission is now to go out into the Barrens because the Sky City they belong to is flying to this village called Greenville, and Greenville supplies iron to the Sky City. They have an iron mine nearby and smelting works, but they've been attacked by some monsters. And normally when a few wandering monsters show up, the iron miners are pretty tough folks and they deal with it. But this time the iron miners have disappeared, so things are looking pretty bad for Greenville. And so the players get sent out. Each lieutenant is given a section of the territory, and you guys get sent to the north, which is where the iron mines are. So I set up a couple of quick combats, and one thing I learned really quickly about Fantasy Age that had not come up when we did the one-shot is how important it is to keep track of turn order. Like I was doing a bad job of tracking turn order. And since our first session, I went out and bought the GM screen, which has a dry erase board to write down what the initiative order is, because I just had a hell of a time keeping track of all the characters. And the other thing I ran into was that combat in in Fantasy Age, it is slow. It's 15 seconds a round, which I remember old school D&D was about that. But it just felt really slow, and that might be because I've been playing. I played GURPS for a number of years, and GURPS a round is 1 second, and so I had trouble wrapping my head around that. And I think I'm going to go back and rewrite the order of play, possibly rewrite how a turn works in combat, and get you guys to bust on that and see how it works.
Well, I remember D&D for me was 6 seconds a round, not 15, and so it moved a little bit faster. But then we also had issues with range, because we were looking at the inches on a board versus distance in the real world.
Right.
And we looked at pole arms seemed to be a little bit longer than they should have been to be wieldy.
Right.
But whereas ranged weapons, some of them seemed long, some of them didn't. So we wanted to work on that.
Yeah, I remember that the game defines adjacent as being within 6 feet. Mm-hmm. And that seems to me to be an awfully forgiving definition of adjacency. That just seems a lot to me. I think I got to rein that in to adjacent being like, if a hex is 3 feet across, then adjacent is the next hex, or the next square, whatever grid we're using for a given scene.
But in the story, right, one player at the table, because there are 4 of us. There were supposed to be 4 of us at the table.
Yep.
We were missing one player that night, so I NPC'd the second character.
Yep, the healer.
The healer.
So you're still the healer. Even when you're not the healer, you're still playing the healer.
Well, because I built a standard fighter, right? Just a shield and board. Or, sorry.
Sword and shield?
Sword and shield. Sword and board is what I was going for. Yeah. And then we had another fighter. We had the lieutenant, the one in charge, was a player playing that character. And he played a ranger. So it was a rogue with a bow in this world. And then we had a healer, and the healer didn't show, so I NPC'd it. But allowing one of us to be in charge of the group made sure that we kept pushing the story along. We kept moving forward without requiring an NPC to be in charge and tell us what to do. But it also allowed us to have different character level interactions with each other, because now I could be, buddies with the other fighter, and the two of us can potentially take on the man in the form of the lieutenant who's in charge of us, who's also sitting at the table with us. And then you sent us along with 2 higher level NPCs just to make sure if we got into trouble that we wouldn't have a total party kill immediately.
Right, and this is another case of me giving it to the players. They got to control these 2. They got 2 city guardsmen to escort them along, and ostensibly the player characters outrank the city guardsmen, but the city guardsmen are a level higher right now because the players are still first level. But the city guardsmen will kind of stay frozen in second level as the campaign proceeds, except for Lucky Feather, which brings us to Lucky Feather, the most improbably lucky city guardsman NPC I've ever seen. He rolled, 3 critical successes in a row?
Yes.
Right. And so he got named. He's now a named NPC. I'm sure in the next session he'll have his own character card, and I'm sure if we ever have a player kill, there's going to be people lining up to take over and play Lucky Feather. They're going to want him as their character, I think.
I mean, if we ever need someone to just drop in at the table, they could just take over Lucky
Feather. That's true. That's true. That's true. So anyway, we got you guys to the mines.
Mm-hmm.
You had one encounter along the way with these monsters, which looked like giant birds, and turned out to be...
feathered raptors.
Yep, feathered raptors, because I've been following my science lately, and science says dinosaurs had wings and feathers.
Growing up with Jurassic Park, they do not. But...
Well, yeah. I predate Jurassic Park.
Yes.
At least the movie. I confess I didn't read the book until after I'd seen the movie, so that's my fault. Anywho, and so you managed to defeat one out in the wilds, and that was my foreshadowing to give you guys a sense of how tough they were. And the answer is, if 3 of you shoot arrows at them at the same time, you'll take it right down, especially if Lucky Feather rolls a crit.
Yes.
Which he did. And for those of you who don't know Fantasy Age, the way it works is you roll 3 differently colored dice, and if any 2 of the 3 roll a pair, so say you roll something like this, 5, 5, 1, and the die roll is a success, then the off-color die generates bonus points that you can spend for stunts. And so Lucky Feather rolled trip 6s, and he used his stunt points to buy 2 extra dice of damage, and then there was 2 other arrows flying into the thing. So it went down, it was supposed to be foreshadowing about how tough these were, and it said it was foreshadowing about how easily they can be taken out if you just roll really high, which you guys just kept doing. So I didn't get to hurt anybody hardly. You guys were tough. You got to the mines. You cleared out the monsters out of there. The last couple retreated.
That gave us a few scary moments, though, because there's so many in cramped environments, right? So it wasn't this wide open field, just feather them from a distance. It was, here's 3 lanes of entry that they're coming from, because you drew it out on this large map on the table.
Yep.
And we could see, and then we tried to keep it more realistic, who's holding the lantern.
Right.
So you can't hold a weapon or your shield and a lantern.
Right.
You have to make sure that you're in the proper line of sight and range. If you're on the corner, we got hit with swarms of little ones and then multiple big ones. And so it kept us on our toes.
Oh, good. Because on my side of the screen, I could see that I was doing nearly no damage and you guys were shredding my monsters. So I'm really glad you guys were scared. I wanted you to be scared.
We got lucky, though.
Well, Lucky Feather rolled, again, multiple crits. Yeah, there was one scene at which everybody looked at it and was like, well, we missed Lucky Feather, but there's no way he's going to survive this round. And what, miss, oh, and he kills that one, and oh my God, So he was just all around badass.
I mean, yes, as a GM, your monsters were rolling horribly for actually doing damage.
I am notorious for rolling horribly as a GM. I have actually seen players say, well, we would be in trouble, but Kevin's rolling the dice. So that led to the role playing scene where you guys found down in one of the bottom levels of the mines
A surviving miner.
surviving miner, and that was Sal. And here's Sal, everybody. Again, everybody gets to see a card, a picture. Where am I getting all my pictures? Google image search is my friend. I make no bones. I am not a good illustrator, but I'm really good at finding other people's art and using it in my house game under fair use. And surprisingly, a lot of the images I'm getting are coming from Pathfinder, because I'm not a Pathfinder player. I wasn't familiar with Pathfinder, but I really like the aesthetic that they have built for Pathfinder. I like the way the characters look, so that's kind of cool. I might have to give Pathfinder a shot if they carry that visual aesthetic over into the gameplay aesthetic. I might have to try playing Pathfinder. Anyway, that's.
I've read the rule book, but I haven't played it myself.
Yeah, so we may have to try that at a con or something.
Mm-hmm.
So by then it was pretty late, and so we left there. You guys battened up for the night.
Spend the night in the mine.
You blew up the portal.
So yeah, you had introduced in the one shot previously that there are portals opening up around the world, introducing monsters of different stripes into the world at different places. And we'd previously left off in that one shot with leaving that portal open and wondering what was on the other side. And when we returned to this campaign, it's several years later. We're not in the same place. We're not the same characters. So there's this new portal that's introducing these dinosaurs. And so we use the mining explosives to just cave in the area that has the portal, hopefully destroying the portal. And then batten down the hatches for the night so we could both break for the session and call it a night in the game. And then the next day begin the trek back to town and any mop-up procedures we had to do.
Exactly. So that's where we broke off for the first session. And so in our next video, we'll talk about the second session. In the meantime, you keep watching, and we'll be here.